I am Connor Torres, I'm 25 years old, and tonight, my own father stood in front of 50 of the city's wealthiest lawyers and announced that my existence was essentially a disappointment compared to my younger brother. Before I tell you about the moment the hospital director stood up and absolutely destroyed my father's ego, drop a comment below and let me know where you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Sterling is the kind of restaurant where the air conditioning smells like expensive perfume and old money. It's the kind of place where the napkins are made of linen thicker than my bedsheets at home, and the waiters move like ghosts, silent, efficient, and judging you if you use the wrong fork. My father, Richard Torres, was standing by the entrance. He looked like he owned the place. To be fair, he acted like he owned every place he walked into. He was leaning against the valet stand, right next to his pride and joy, a midnight blue Rolls-Royce Ghost. He was shaking hands with men in Italian suits, his laugh booming across the parking lot. That laugh, it was a practiced sound. It was the sound of a man who charges $600 an hour just to read an email. I got out of my Uber a block away. I didn't want him to see me arriving in a 10-year-old Toyota Camry with a dent in the rear bumper. I walked the rest of the way, smoothing down the lapels of my suit. It was a charcoal gray suit I'd bought off the rack at a department store 3 years ago. It was a little tight in the shoulders now, and the fabric had that slight shine that cheap polyester gets when it's been ironed too many times. When I reached the entrance, my father didn't even turn his head. He was deep in conversation with Mr. Charles Harris, the senior partner at his firm. Mr. Harris was a legend in the city, a man who could end a company with a single phone call. "Richard," Mr. Harris was saying, his voice gravelly and low. "Big night for the Torres dynasty." "Huge night, Charles." My father beamed, finally glancing my way. His eyes flickered over me for a nanosecond, assessing my cheap suit, my scuffed shoes, and dismissed me just as quickly. "We're securing the legacy tonight." He wasn't talking about me. I slipped past them, feeling like a ghost in my own life. Inside, the restaurant was a sea of crystal chandeliers and polished mahogany. There were 50 guests, maybe more. I recognized most of them. They were my father's colleagues, clients, golfing buddies. People who measured human worth by the size of a portfolio or the brand of a watch. My mother, Patricia, was flitting around the tables like a nervous butterfly. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my entire tuition for a semester. When she saw me, her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she pasted it back on. "Connor," she said, coming over and pecking me on the cheek. Her lips barely grazed my skin. She smelled of hairspray and Chardonnay. "You're here." "I'm here, Mom," I said. "Happy celebration." "Yes, yes," she said, looking over my shoulder to see if anyone more important had arrived. "Listen, honey, we put you at table 6. It's near the kitchen, but it's spacious. You'll have room to relax." Table 6, the exile table. I looked across the room. The head table was draped in gold cloth. There was a massive banner hanging behind it. It didn't say, "Happy graduation, Connor." It didn't say, "Congratulations on your master's degree." It said, "The Torres Legacy, celebrating Liam's acceptance to Harvard Law." My stomach twisted. I knew this was coming. I knew it, and yet, seeing it in gold glitter script still felt like a physical punch to the gut. This was supposed to be a joint party. That was the lie they told me to get me here. "A celebration for the boys," Mom had said on the phone. I walked over to table 6. It was literally next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter came out, I got a blast of steam and the smell of roasting garlic. Sitting there were my second cousins who nobody talked to, and my crazy Aunt Clara, who immediately zeroed in on me. "Connor," she screeched, waving a breadstick. "Still wiping butts at the hospital, are we?" "I'm a nurse anesthetist, Aunt Clara," I said, sitting down and unfolding my napkin. My hands were shaking. I clenched them under the table. "Same thing, honey," she dismissed, biting into the bread. "You know, your cousin Bob just made manager at the car dealership. Real management position." I didn't answer. I poured myself a glass of water and drank it straight down. Then the room went quiet. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center of the room. My father walked to the microphone stand, holding a glass of vintage champagne. He tapped the glass with a silver spoon. Ting, ting, ting. The sound cut through the room. Everyone turned. 50 faces, flushed with expensive wine, looked up at Richard Torres. Thank you all for coming. My father's voice was smooth, rich, authoritative. Tonight is a special night. Tonight, we celebrate the future. He paused for effect. He was a trial lawyer. He knew how to work a room. When I started my firm 20 years ago, he continued, I dreamed of the day I could pass the torch. I dreamed of a legacy, a Torres legacy. He gestured to his right. My younger brother, Liam, stood up. Liam was 22, tan, wearing a bespoke suit that fit him like a second skin. He had that easy, arrogant smile of someone who has never heard the word no in his entire life. Liam, my father said, his voice thickening with emotion, you have made me the proudest father on earth. Harvard Law, you are walking in the footsteps of giants. Applause rippled through the room. Men nodded approvingly. Women cooed. It takes a certain kind of man to command the law, my father said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the microphone amplified perfectly. It takes strength, takes intellect. It takes the ability to lead, not follow. He took a sip of champagne, and then his eyes found me. He didn't look away. He stared right at me, sitting there at the kitchen table in my cheap suit. We all know, he said, and a few people chuckled, anticipating the joke, that not everyone is cut out for greatness. Some of us, well, someone has to change the bedpans, right? The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't a roar, but a polite, cruel ripple of amusement. My blood ran cold. I could feel the heat rising up my neck. I froze. Connor, he said my name. He actually said my name. I'm glad you could make it. I know your shifts are demanding. Washing up after the sick is noble work, son. Truly, we need servants in this world just as much as we need leaders. Servants. He called his son a servant in front of the entire city elite. But tonight, he turned his back on me, dismissing me completely. Tonight is about the leaders. Liam, I wish it was you holding that diploma tonight. Wait, you will be holding a much better one in 3 years. But honestly, son, you are the only child who has ever truly made me proud. The air left the room for me. I felt like I had been slapped. Hard. Mom was sitting next to Liam. She nodded. She actually nodded. She smiled that practiced, supportive wife smile and clapped her hands. And to show you just how proud I am, my father gestured to the screen behind him. A little gift, to get you to class in style. The screen flickered to life. A photo appeared. It was a car. Not just any car. It was a brand new, silver Porsche 911 Turbo S. It's waiting in the driveway tomorrow morning, my father announced. Liam's jaw dropped. He high-fived his friends. The room cheered. To Liam, my father toasted. To Liam, the room echoed. I sat there. I looked at the glass of water in front of me. The ice had melted. I thought about the last 4 years. I thought about the nights I spent studying until my eyes bled. I thought about the double shifts I worked to pay for my own books because Dad said he wouldn't waste good money on a bad degree. I thought about the lives I had saved. Real lives. People who were breathing today because I knew exactly how much propofol to push, exactly how to intubate a crushed airway in seconds. And he called me a servant. I pushed my chair back. It made a scraping sound against the floor, but nobody heard it over the applause for Liam. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like they were made of lead, but my head was clear, crystal clear. I was done. I started walking toward the exit. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my mother. I just focused on the door. I wanted fresh air. I wanted to get away from the smell of money and hypocrisy. Leaving so soon? Aunt Clara whispered loudly as I passed. Can't handle the spotlight not being on you? I didn't answer her. I kept walking. But just as I reached the heavy oak doors, Just as I was about to push them open and vanish into the night, I heard a sound. It was the sound of a chair being pushed back. Violently, fell over with a loud crash. The room went silent. The applause died instantly. I stopped. My hand was on the brass handle of the door, but I didn't push. I turned around. At table 6, the exile table near the kitchen, a man was standing up. He was a tall man, with silver hair and shoulders that looked like they could carry the weight of the world. He was wearing a suit that was understated but clearly cut by a master tailor. It was Dr. Samuel Webb, the director of Presbyterian Memorial Hospital, the man who ran the biggest medical system in the state. My father frowned, shielding his eyes against the spotlight. "Excuse me?" my father said, his voice irritated. "We're in the middle of a toast. Who are you?" Dr. Webb didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice was calm, cold, and it carried to every corner of the silent room. "Richard Torres," Dr. Webb said. "You have a lot of opinions for a man who is about to lose his biggest client." My father laughed, a nervous, confused sound. "I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the man who signs your son's paychecks," Dr. Webb interrupted. He stepped away from the table and began walking toward the center of the room. "And I think it's time everyone here knew exactly what kind of servant Connor really is." My father's smile faltered. For the first time all night, he looked uncertain. I took my hand off the door handle. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. To understand why that moment at the restaurant felt like the end of a war, you have to understand the battle that led up to it. It didn't start that night. It started 4 years ago at a dinner table that looked very much like the one at the Sterling, just without the waiters. I was 21. It was a Sunday night. In the Torres house, Sunday dinner was mandatory. My father sat at the head of the table, cutting into a medium-rare steak like he was dissecting a hostile witness. "So," he said, not looking up, "law school applications. The deadlines are approaching, Connor. I assume you've finished your personal statement." I looked at my mother. She was busy arranging asparagus on her plate, avoiding my eyes. I looked at Liam. He was 17 then, texting under the table, completely unbothered. "I'm not applying to law school, Dad," I said. The knife stopped moving. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. My father slowly put down his fork and knife. He picked up his napkin and dabbed the corners of his mouth. "Excuse me?" he said softly. "I'm not applying," I repeated, my voice shaking slightly. "I've been accepted into the BSN program, nursing school. I want to be a nurse anesthetist." My father stared at me for a long time. Then he laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Nursing? You want to be a nurse? That's a woman's job, Connor. You want to change bedsheets? You want to take orders from doctors who are half as smart as you. It's not just changing sheets, Dad. CRNAs are highly specialized. They manage anesthesia. They save lives in the OR. It's hard science. It's servitude," he snapped, his face turning red. "For 3 generations, the Torres men have been lawyers. We create the law. We don't wipe brows. I will not have a son of mine wasting his potential in a pair of scrubs." "It's what I want to do," I insisted. "Then you'll do it without my money," he said. The finality in his tone was absolute. "If you choose this hobby over your legacy, you are on your own. No tuition, no rent, no allowance, nothing." "Richard," my mother whispered weakly, "maybe we can discuss." "There is nothing to discuss, Patricia." He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "If he wants to be a blue-collar worker, he can live like one." And he meant it. The next day, my credit cards were canceled. The car I drove, a nice BMW he'd leased, was gone from the driveway. My bank account, which he had access to, was drained of the savings he had held for me. I moved out that week. I found a tiny studio apartment in the worst part of town. The walls were paper-thin, and the radiator clanked all night like a dying engine. I sold my watch, my video game console, and most of my clothes just to pay the first month's rent and the deposit. For the next 4 years, My life was a blur of exhaustion. Nursing school is brutal. People think it's just learning how to check blood pressure. It's not. It's anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, pathophysiology. It's memorizing thousands of drug interactions. It's learning how to keep a human body alive when it's trying desperately to die. I woke up at 4 a.m. every day to study before class. I went to lectures from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Then I went to clinical rotations at the hospital until 11 p.m. And on weekends I worked double shifts at a dive bar downtown, pouring beer for drunks just to pay my tuition. I was always tired. My bones ached. My eyes burned. I remember one Christmas. I was working at the bar. It was 2 a.m. The music was pounding. The floor was sticky with spilled beer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from Instagram. Liam had posted a photo. He and Dad and Mom were in Aspen for a ski trip. They were standing in front of a massive fireplace in a luxury chalet, holding mugs of cocoa. The caption read, "Family time. Missing nothing." I stared at that screen until it went black. I wanted to cry, but I was too dehydrated from the heat of the bar. I just put the phone back in my pocket and went back to washing glasses. But I wasn't entirely alone. There was Grandma Eleanor, my father's mother. She was the one person Richard Torres couldn't bully. She was 80 years old, sharp as a tack, and she hated what her son had become. Every Tuesday, I would drive my beat-up Toyota, which I bought for $1,500 from a scrapyard, to her house to check her blood pressure and organize her pills. "You look thin, Connor," she would say, her eyes narrowing. "I'm fine, Grandma, just studying hard." "He's a fool, you know," she would say, referring to my father. "He thinks money is character. He forgets his own father drove an ambulance for 30 years. She would hand me a tin of homemade oatmeal cookies when I left. And in that tin, tucked under the wax paper, there was always an envelope. Sometimes it was $100, sometimes $200. Gas money, she called it. I tried to refuse it, but she would hit me with her cane if I tried. "Take it," she ordered, "and beat them. Be the best damn nurse that hospital has ever seen. Make them need you." So I did. I poured everything I had into my work. I became obsessed with excellence. In the ICU rotation, I was the student who stayed late to help turn the heavy patients. I was the one who noticed when a patient's urine output dropped slightly, signaling early kidney failure before the labs even came back. I remember the first life I saved. I was in my final rotation. A construction worker came in, crushed by a falling beam. His airway was collapsing. The resident doctor was panicking, struggling to get the breathing tube in. The patient was turning blue. His oxygen saturation was dropping. 80%, 70%. "I can't get a view," the resident yelled. I stepped forward. I didn't think. I just acted on instinct and training. "Let me try," I said. The resident looked at me, desperate. He moved aside. I took the laryngoscope. I visualized the anatomy in my head. I lifted the jaw, swept the tongue. There it was. The vocal cords. Tiny, pearly white. I slid the tube in. "I'm in," I said. "Bag him." The chest rose. The oxygen monitor started beeping a higher pitch. 85%, 90%, 98%. The room let out a breath. The attending physician looked at me over his mask. "Good hands, Torres," he said. "Damn good hands." That night, driving home in my rattling truck, I felt something I had never felt in my father's house. I felt worthy. I didn't need a Porsche. I didn't need a Rolex. I had my hands, and those hands could pull life back from the edge of death. But the financial struggle was real. My student loans were piling up. Interest rates were killer. I was eating instant noodles 5 nights a week. I had holes in my shoes that I filled with cardboard. Meanwhile, Liam was posting pictures of his new fraternity life. Dad had bought him a condo near the campus, so he wouldn't have to deal with dorms. The contrast was sickening. It wasn't jealousy. It was the injustice. It was the fact that I was working myself to the bone to save lives, and I was broke. Liam was partying his way through a generic business degree before law school, and he was living like a king. Then came the graduation invite. I was scrubbing into a surgery when my phone buzzed in my locker. Later, I checked it. An email from Mom. Subject: Family Celebration. Connor, we are hosting a dinner at the Sterling on the 15th. It will be a celebration for the family. Please try to come. Dad has invited some important people. I stared at the email. Celebration for the family. Not Connor's graduation. Just the family. I knew what that meant. It meant it was a Richard Torres show. But I had to go. I wanted them to see me. I wanted to stand there with my degree and force them to acknowledge me. I didn't know then that I was walking into a trap. But looking back, I should have known. My father never did anything unless he could win. And in his mind, my graduation was a loss he needed to cover up. 2 weeks before the party, the engine of my Toyota Camry started making a sound like a bag of hammers being thrown down a staircase. The brakes were grinding metal on metal. I knew what it was. Brake pads were gone, rotors were shot. I took it to a mechanic I knew, a guy named Sal who gave me discounts because I once looked at a mole on his neck and told him to get it checked. It was benign, but he was grateful. "Connor, man, it's bad," Sal said, wiping grease on a rag. $500 for the parts alone. I won't charge you labor, but I can't let you drive this. It's a death trap. $500. I had $42 in my checking account. My next paycheck from the bar wasn't for another week, and that was earmarked for rent. I sat on a stack of tires in Sal's shop, staring at the floor. I had to ask. I had no choice. I needed the car to get to my clinicals. I drove the death trap to my father's law firm. The Torres and Partners building was a glass monolith downtown. I walked into the lobby, feeling small in my scrubs. The receptionist, a woman who had known me since I was 5, gave me a pitying look. "He's in a meeting, Connor," she said. "I'll wait." I waited for 2 hours. Finally, the heavy oak doors opened. My father walked out, laughing with a client. When he saw me, his smile vanished. "Connor," he said, checking his Rolex. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I'm very busy. I need 5 minutes, Dad." He sighed, loud and dramatic, and waved me into his office. He didn't offer me a seat. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk and started signing papers. "Make it quick." "My car broke down," I said, hating the way my voice sounded small. "I need $500 for repairs. Just a loan. I'll pay you back with my first paycheck from the hospital." He stopped writing. He looked up, his eyes cold and hard like flint. "A loan?" he repeated. "Connor, we had an agreement. You chose your path. Independence means independence. It's $500, Dad. You spent more than that on lunch today." "It's the principle," he said, leaning back. "If I bail you out now, you'll never learn. You wanted to be a nurse. Nurses struggle. That's the reality you chose. Maybe if you sold that Xbox of yours." "I sold that 4 years ago to buy textbooks," I snapped. He shrugged. "Then take the bus. Character is built in adversity, Connor." I stood there, humiliated, furious. "Character? You think this is about character?" "I think," he said, picking up his pen again, "that you are realizing that actions have consequences. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to make a call to the dealership." He picked up the phone, ignoring me completely. I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me cold. "Yes, hello? This is Richard Torres. Calling about the Porsche 911 Turbo S order. Yes, for my son. I want the silver metallic. Can we ensure delivery by Saturday night? It's a surprise gift. Yes, put it on the company account. No, no limit on the options." I froze. My hand hovered over the doorknob. A Porsche. He wouldn't loan me $500 for brakes so I could get to work to save lives. But he was buying Liam a $200,000 sports car as a surprise gift. The injustice of it felt like physical pain. It burned in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash his office to pieces. But I didn't. Instead, a cold calm washed over me. It was the same calm I felt in the ER when a patient was crashing. The emotions shut down. The logic took over. He wanted to play games? Fine. We would play. I walked out of his office without saying a word. I didn't take the bus. I drove my grinding, screeching car straight to Presbyterian Memorial Hospital. I didn't go to the locker room. I went straight to the administrative wing. I marched up to the executive assistant's desk. "I need to speak to Dr. Webb," I said. The assistant looked at my wrinkled scrubs. "Dr. Webb is fully booked until next month. Tell him it's Connor Torres. Tell him Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell sent me. Grandma Eleanor." The trump card. The assistant's eyes widened slightly. She picked up the phone. 30 seconds later, the double doors opened. Dr. Samuel Webb was a legend in the medical community. He was intimidating, brilliant, and notoriously hard to please. He beckoned me into his office. It was simpler than my father's, but it felt more powerful. There were no awards on the wall, just photos of his family and a few framed medical patents. "Connor," he said, gesturing to a chair, "your grandmother speaks very highly of you. She says you're the best student she's seen in 40 years. She's biased," I said. "She is," Dr. Webb smiled. "But my chief of anesthesiology isn't. I have your file here." He tapped a folder on his desk. "Top of your class. Highest clinical scores in the history of the program. And that tracheostomy you did on the construction worker? The attending said you have ice water in your veins." "I just did what I was trained to do, sir." Humility. I like that. Dr. Webb leaned forward. "We want you, Connor. We don't want you to go to City General or Mercy. We want you here." He slid a paper across the desk. It was a contract. I looked at the numbers. My breath hitched. The base salary was listed clearly. $210,000 per year. Plus a signing bonus of $20,000. Plus full benefits. Plus loan forgiveness after 3 years. $210,000. I did the math in my head. My father's law firm started their junior associates, the guys who worked 80 hours a week doing paperwork, at $140,000. I was starting at $70,000 more than the people my father considered elite. "Is the compensation adequate?" Dr. Webb asked, misinterpreting my silence. It's more than adequate, sir." "Good. Then sign it." I picked up the pen. But then I stopped. An idea formed in my mind. It was petty, maybe, but after the Porsche phone call, I didn't care about being the bigger person anymore. "I'll sign it," I said slowly. "On one condition." Dr. Webb raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating?" Bold. "Not for money," I said. "I have a graduation party this Saturday. At the Sterling. My father, he doesn't think very highly of my career choice. He thinks I'm going to be a servant." Dr. Webb's face darkened. He respected the profession more than anything. "I want you to come," I said. "Bring the contract. I want to sign it there. I want you to present the offer to me, publicly." Dr. Webb looked at me. He studied my face, seeing the hurt and the anger behind my eyes. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "The Sterling, you say?" he asked. "I love their crab cakes, and I happen to know your father, Richard Torres, the man who tried to sue us last year over a frivolous slip and fall case and lost. That's him." "I'll be there," Dr. Webb said. "And Connor? Wear a suit. You're a professional now." I walked out of that hospital floating on air. I had a weapon now. A nuclear weapon. I called Sal the mechanic. "Fix the brakes, Sal. Put it on a tab. I'll pay you double next week." "You got it, kid," Sal said. The next 2 days were a blur of nervous energy. I didn't tell anyone. Not Mom. Not Liam. Not even Grandma Eleanor, though I suspected she knew something was up. She had that twinkle in her eye when I dropped off her pills on Friday. "Wear the gray suit," she told me. "And polish your shoes. You're going to war, boy." "How do you know?" I asked. She just winked. "I'll see you there." "You're coming?" "Mom said you weren't on the list." "Since when do I need a list to see my grandson?" She scoffed. "I'm driving myself. Or rather, I have a ride." I didn't put two and two together then. I was too focused on the impending showdown. I imagined my father's face when he saw the numbers. I imagined Liam's jealousy. But as Saturday approached, the doubt started to creep in. Was I being too dramatic? Was I ruining a family moment? Maybe I should just take the job and move on. Maybe I should just let them have their Porsche and their arrogance. Then I remembered the phone call. If he wants to be a blue-collar worker, he can live like one. No, I wasn't backing down. They wanted a show? I was going to give them a show. Saturday night arrived with a humid heat that made my cheap suit stick to my back before I even left my apartment. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror of my bathroom. I looked tired. The dark circles under my eyes from finals week were still there. But my eyes were steady. I ordered an Uber. My car was fixed, but I didn't want to drive it. I wanted to arrive without the hassle of valet judging my rusted bumper. The Uber driver was a chatty guy named Dave. "Big night?" he asked, eyeing my suit. "You could say that," I muttered. "Family reunion. Good luck, man. Families are complicated." Understatement of the year, Dave. We pulled up to the Sterling. The lineup of cars was obscene. It looked like a luxury car dealership showroom. I saw Mr. Harris's bright red Ferrari Roma. I saw the Bentleys and the Mercedes S-Classes. And there, front and center, was my father's Rolls-Royce Ghost, shimmering under the entrance lights like a massive, expensive shark. I got out. The valet, a kid maybe 2 years younger than me, rushed over to open the door of the car behind me. Alexis. He completely ignored me. "Excuse me," I said, trying to get past the velvet rope. The host at the door, a man with a clipboard who looked down his nose through rimless glasses, blocked my path. "Deliveries are around the back." I stopped. "I'm not a delivery driver. I'm a guest." He looked me up and down, sneering at my scuffed shoes. "Name? Connor Torres." He scanned the list. His finger traced down to the very bottom. "Ah, yes, the son. Go right in." The way he said "the son" sounded like the mistake. I walked in. The air conditioning hit me. I've already described the scene, but I want you to feel the isolation. It wasn't just that I was ignored. It was that I was actively avoided. I saw Uncle Mike near the bar. He saw me, made eye contact, and immediately turned around to talk to a waiter. I saw my cousin Sarah. She waved a tiny, pathetic wave and then looked at her phone. Mom found me then. Her nervousness was palpable. She was vibrating with anxiety. "Connor, please," she whispered, grabbing my elbow. Her nails dug in. "Don't cause a scene tonight. Your father is... He's very focused on the partners. This merger is important." "I'm not going to cause a scene, Mom. I'm just here to graduate." Right, she said distractedly. "Just stay at table 6. And maybe unbutton your jacket? You look stiff." She pushed me toward the back of the room. Table 6 was a round table squeezed between the kitchen door and a large potted fern. It was the overflow table. Sitting there were the people the Torres family couldn't not invite, but didn't want to see. There was Aunt Clara. There was Mrs. Gable, an elderly neighbor who was half deaf. And there was an empty chair next to me. "Who's sitting there?" I asked, pointing to the empty seat. "Oh, your mother said you invited a professor?" Aunt Clara said, her mouth full of cheese. "Some nursing teacher? Probably won't show up. Who wants to come to a fancy place like this on a teacher's salary?" I checked my watch. 7:15 p.m. Dr. Webb was late. My heart began to hammer. Had he bailed? Was I sitting here alone, about to be humiliated with no backup? Then the doors opened. It wasn't Dr. Webb. It was Liam. He walked in like he was a rock star. He was high-fiving people. He stopped at the bar, ordered a drink, and laughed loudly. He spotted me in the corner. He walked over, a smirk plastered on his face. "Hey, big brother," Liam said. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "Like the suit. Vintage." "It's just a suit, Liam." Cool. "Hey, look." He leaned in. "Don't take it personally tonight, okay? Dad's just You know how he is. He's proud of you deep down. Somewhere. Maybe. He laughed at his own joke. Congratulations on law school, I said, keeping my voice even. Have you started reading the prep books? Nah. Liam waved a hand. I've got the Torah's name. I'll figure it out. Besides, that's what clerks are for, right? To do the reading. He winked and walked away to join the partners at the head table. I gripped the tablecloth. That's what clerks are for. He didn't even care about the law. He just cared about the lifestyle. 7:30 p.m. Everyone was seated. Salads were being served. Still no Dr. Webb. I pulled out my phone. No text. No email. Panic set in. He wasn't coming. I was going to have to sit through this alone. I was going to have to listen to my father tear me down and just take it. Then, just as the waiters were clearing the salad plates, the main doors swung open again. The host tried to stop the new arrivals, but he was brushed aside like a fly. Walking in was Dr. Samuel Webb. He looked impeccable in a navy suit, but he wasn't alone. Holding his arm, leaning on an ebony cane, was Grandma Eleanor. She was wearing a silk dress that looked older than me but was more elegant than anything else in the room. She was wearing her pearls, and she was smiling. My father stood up halfway, confused. Mother! Grandma Eleanor ignored him. She looked around the room, her eyes sweeping over the crowd until they landed on me. She tapped Dr. Webb's arm and pointed. They walked straight past the head table, straight past the partners, straight past my stunned mother. They came to table 6. Sorry we're late, Grandma announced, her voice carrying over the silence. We were discussing business in the car. Samuel drives too slow. I drive the speed limit, Eleanor, Dr. Webb replied smoothly. He looked at me and extended a hand. Connor, good to see you. Dr. Webb. I stood up, relieved. Grandma. Sit, Grandma commanded. She took the empty chair next to me. Dr. Webb motioned for a waiter to bring another chair. The waiter scrambled to obey. The room was buzzing now. People were whispering. Who is that? Is that Eleanor Torres? Who is the man? My father walked over, his face a mask of forced politeness. Mother, he said stiffly, I didn't know you were coming. And this gentleman? This is Dr. Samuel Webb, Grandma said, not looking at him. He's my guest, and Connor's guest. Go sit down, Richard. You're blocking the view of the kitchen. My father's jaw tightened. He looked at Dr. Webb, recognition dawning in his eyes. He knew the name. He knew the power. But he couldn't cause a scene now. Enjoy the dinner. My father spat out and turned on his heel. Dr. Webb leaned toward me. Your father is charming, he whispered dryly. You have no idea, I muttered. The contract is in my jacket pocket, Dr. Webb said, taking a sip of water. Just give me the signal. What signal? When you've had enough, he said. I looked at the head table. My father was whispering angrily to my mother. Liam was looking confused. I think, I said, watching my father pick up his champagne glass and the spoon. That signal is coming very, very soon. The moment my father tapped that glass, the air in the room changed. It went from a party to a coronation. Ting, ting, ting. I watched him from the back of the room. Dr. Webb sat silently beside me, his arms crossed, observing Richard like a scientist observing a lab rat. Grandma Eleanor was buttering a roll, completely unbothered. Thank you all, Richard began. I've told you what he said. I've told you about the servant comment. But experiencing it in the moment was different. It wasn't just the words. It was the delivery. He delivered the insults with a smile. He packaged his cruelty as fatherly wisdom. When he said, someone has to change the bedpans, he looked directly at Mr. Harris, inviting him to share the joke. Mr. Harris didn't laugh. He frowned, looking down at his plate. But the others, the junior partners, the sycophants, they chuckled. They wanted to be on the winning side. I felt Dr. Webb tense up beside me. I saw his hand tighten on his napkin. Easy, I whispered. Wait for it. Then came the Porsche. To Liam. Richard shouted. The image of the silver car gleamed on the projection screen. It was a beautiful car, a masterpiece of engineering, and it was a symbol of everything my father valued. Speed, flash, cost. Liam was beaming. He looked like he had just won the lottery. He stood up and hugged Dad. "Thanks, Dad. You're the best. You deserve it, son." Richard slapped him on the back. "You're the future of this family." He raised his glass again. "I'd like to propose a toast to the Torres name. May it always be associated with power, with prestige, and with the law." "Here, here," the room shouted. My father basked in the adoration. He was high on it. He took a sip of his champagne, his eyes scanning the room, gloating. Then he made a mistake. A fatal mistake. He looked at table 6 again. He looked at me, and he couldn't resist one final dig. He wanted to make sure I knew my place. "And Connor," he said into the microphone, "don't worry. We didn't forget you. I have a gift for you too." He reached under the podium and pulled out a box of rubber gloves. "So you can keep your hands clean while you're helping out," he chuckled. The room went deadly silent. Even the sycophants didn't laugh at that. It was too much. It was cruel. Grandma Eleanor dropped her butter knife, clattered loudly on the china. That was the signal. I didn't have to give it. Dr. Webb stood up. He didn't just stand. He surged upward. He pushed his chair back so hard it nearly tipped over. "That is enough." Dr. Webb's voice boomed. It wasn't a shout, it was a command. It was the voice used to taking control of a trauma bay in chaos. Richard froze. "Excuse me?" "Sit down, sir. You are interrupting a family moment." "Family moment?" Dr. Webb walked out from behind table 6. He walked into the center of the room, right into the spotlight. "Is that what you call this? Publicly humiliating your son? This is a private joke," Richard stammered, his face reddening. "Who are you to interfere?" "I am Dr. Samuel Webb," he announced, turning to face the room, "Director of Presbyterian Memorial Hospital, and I am here to correct a serious error in judgment." Whispers erupted. "The Dr. Webb? The one who runs the medical board?" Richard's arrogance flickered. "Dr. Webb, I didn't realize. We are honored. But this is a legal gathering. I don't care if it's a gathering of saints." Webb cut him off. He reached into his inner jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope. "You just mocked this young man for being a servant. You gave your other son a car for getting accepted into a school. He hasn't even started yet." He turned to me. "Connor, stand up." I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I held my head high. Dr. Webb walked over to me and handed me the envelope. "Open it." I tore open the seal. I pulled out the contract. "Read the highlighted section," Dr. Webb commanded. Out loud. My voice trembled on the first word, but then it steadied. "Base salary, $210,000 per annum. Signing bonus, $20,000. Gasps. Audible gasps filled the room. $210,000. Dr. Webb repeated, projecting his voice to the back row. "For a 25-year-old. Tell me, Richard, what do you pay your first-year associates?" Richard was pale. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "I'll tell you," Dr. Webb continued, "because I hire them for my legal department. The going rate is $140,000. Maybe $150 if they're top of their class." He stepped closer to my father. "Your servant son is making $60,000 a year more than your lawyer son will make in 3 years, if he even passes the bar." Liam sank into his chair. The smirk was gone. "But it's not about the money," Dr. Webb said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Money is just how the market values skill. And let me tell you about Connor's skill." He turned to the audience. "Last week, a patient came into my ER. Cardiac arrest. Massive trauma. Most doctors would have called time of death. Connor Torres identified a tension pneumothorax that 2 residents missed. He decompressed the chest in 10 seconds. He saved that man's life." He pointed at Mr. Harris. "Mr. Harris," Dr. Webb said, "you're a client of this firm. correct? Mr. Harris stood up slowly. He looked at Richard, then at me. I am. That patient, Dr. Webb said, was your vice president of operations, Tom Miller. I believe you know him. Mr. Harris's eyes went wide. Tom? Tom is alive because of him. He pointed at me. He is. Dr. Webb nodded. Connor saved him. While Richard here was probably billing someone for a phone call, his son was literally restarting a human heart. Mr. Harris looked at my father. The look was one of pure disgust. You told me your son was a orderly, Richard. You told me he was slow. I was joking, Charles, Richard stammered. Sweat was beading on his forehead. It's just banter. It's not banter, Mr. Harris said coldly. It's a lie. And if you lie about your own blood, what are you lying to me about? Mr. Harris picked up his wine glass, looked at it, and set it down firmly on the table. I think I'm done here. Charles, wait. Richard stepped forward, knocking over the microphone stand. It screeched, a horrible feedback noise that made everyone cover their ears. But Dr. Webb wasn't finished. One more thing, he said. He turned to Grandma Eleanor. Mrs. Mitchell? Grandma stood up. She leaned heavily on her cane, but her voice was strong. Richard, she said, you forgot who built that firm. Your father started it with money I saved from my nursing shifts. Mom, please, Richard begged. Not now. Yes, now, she said. You think you're a self-made man? You're a man standing on the shoulders of nurses and ambulance drivers. And you just kicked the ladder out from under you. She looked at me. Connor, are you going to sign that contract? Yes, Grandma, I said. I took a pen from the table, a cheap hotel pen. I put the contract on the tablecloth, right next to the untouched salad. And I signed my name. Connor Torres, CRNA. Dr. Webb, I said, handing it back. I accept. Welcome to the team. Dr. Webb shook my hand vigorously. We'll see you Monday. You can park in the physician's lot. We have a spot reserved for you. He looked at Richard one last time. That's where the real leaders park, Richard. Not the ones who need a Rolls-Royce to feel important. The room was deathly silent. Richard stood there, the box of rubber gloves still in his hand, looking like a man whose entire world had just crumbled into dust. The silence in the Sterling was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting. The clinking of silverware had stopped. The waiters were frozen against the walls. I looked at my father. For the first time in my life, he didn't look like a giant. He looked small. He looked old. His expensive suit suddenly looked like a costume. He looked at Mr. Harris, then at his partners, then at Liam, and finally at me. His eyes were pleading. He wanted me to fix this. He wanted me to say it was all a joke, to smooth things over like Mom always did. Connor, he croaked. Son, let's not be hasty. We can talk about this. I picked up the box of rubber gloves he had given me. I held them up. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Dad, I said. My voice was calm. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound sense of pity. I have work on Monday. I have to rest. Connor, please. Mom rushed over, tears streaming down her face. Don't leave like this. Think of the family. I am thinking of the family, Mom, I said. I looked at Grandma Eleanor. I'm taking the only family that matters home. I offered my arm to Grandma. Ready to go? More than ready, she said, hooking her arm through mine. We started walking toward the door. The sea of tables parted for us. People pulled their chairs in to let us pass. They looked at me with something new in their eyes. Not pity, respect, fear maybe. As we passed the head table, Liam stood up. He looked at the projection of the Porsche still on the screen, then at me. Connor, he whispered. I didn't know. I know you didn't, Liam, I said. I stopped for a second. Enjoy the car. But remember, gas and insurance are expensive. And Dad's biggest client just walked out. Liam looked at Mr. Harris, who was already putting on his coat. Liam's face went pale. He realized the money tap might be turning off. We reached the door. My father ran after us. He actually ran, stumbling a bit. Connor! Wait! He grabbed my shoulder. I spun around. I didn't shout. I didn't hit him. I just looked at his hand on my cheap suit jacket until he let go. What, Dad? I can fix this, he stammered. The salary, $210,000? That's fantastic. We can invest it. I can help you manage it. The firm has a great investment wing. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Even now, after everything, he was trying to get a piece of it. He was trying to control it. You don't get it, I said. You think this is about the money? It was never about the money. It was about respect. And you can't buy that with a Porsche, and you can't invest your way into it. I'm your father, he said, desperate. Biologically, yes, I said. But you're not my dad. A dad doesn't humiliate his son to impress his friends. I handed him the box of rubber gloves. I pressed them into his chest. Here, I said. You keep these. You're going to need them to clean up the mess you made tonight. I turned around and walked out into the humid night air. Dr. Webb was waiting by his car. A black Volvo SUV, understated and safe. I can give you two a ride, he offered. That would be lovely, Samuel, Grandma said. I looked back at the entrance of the Sterling. Mr. Harris was walking out, talking angrily on his cell phone. I heard him say, "Pull the files. Tonight, I want everything transferred to Stevens and McCoy by Monday morning." My father stood in the doorway, watching his empire crumble. I got into the Volvo. The leather was soft. The engine purred to life. As we pulled away, I saw the valet kid. He looked at me in the back seat of the executive car, confused. I smiled. I wasn't the servant anymore. I wasn't the disappointment. I was Connor Torres, CRNA. I saved lives. I made my own way. And for the first time in 25 years, I was free. 6 months. That's all it took for the world to flip upside down. If you had told me half a year ago that I would be waking up to the sunrise over the river, drinking coffee in a kitchen with marble countertops that I paid for myself, I would have told you to check your oxygen saturation levels. But here I was. I walked out to the balcony of my new apartment. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't the sprawling, cold estate my parents lived in. It was a penthouse loft in the city, close to the hospital. It was modern, warm, and most importantly, it was quiet. There was no judgment in these walls. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and grabbed my keys. Down in the garage, she was waiting. Not a Porsche. I didn't want a Porsche. That felt too much like trying to be them. I bought an Audi RS7. It was dark gray, understated, but when you stepped on the gas, it had a growl that let you know it meant business. It was a car for a professional, not a playboy. I slid into the leather seat. The engine purred to life. A smooth, confident sound, worlds away from the death rattle of my old Toyota Camry. I patted the dashboard. Let's go to work. Work had become my sanctuary. When I walked into the pre-op area at Presbyterian Memorial now, the atmosphere was different. The nurses nodded with genuine respect. The surgeons, notoriously difficult people who usually looked right through anesthesia staff, greeted me by name. "Morning, Connor." Dr. Evans, the chief of orthopedics, said as I scrubbed in. "I saw you're on my spinal case today. Good. I sleep better knowing you're monitoring the vitals." "Thanks, document. I'll keep him steady." "I heard about the Sterling incident." Evans chuckled, turning off the water. "Legendary. Harris is still talking about it at the country club. Apparently, your father's golf handicap has gone up because his hands shake too much." I didn't laugh. I just nodded. I haven't spoken to him. Probably for the best. Harris pulled his corporate account from your dad's firm, took it to Stevens and McCoy. That's a $3 million retainer gone overnight. Ouch. I focused on the soap suds on my hands. $3 million. My father had traded a $3 million client for a cheap laugh at his son's expense. The math of karma was brutal. My shift was intense. A 12-hour run of traumas and complex surgeries. But I loved it. I loved the focus. I loved the moment when the patient drifted off, trusting me with their life, and the moment they woke up, groggy but safe. When I clocked out at 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Can I come over? I know where you live." Grandma told me. I stared at the screen. I knew who it was. 20 minutes later, my buzzer rang. I let him in. When I opened the door, Liam was standing in the hallway. He looked terrible. The golden boy, the future of the Torres dynasty, looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His bespoke suit was wrinkled. He wasn't wearing a tie. And that arrogant smirk? It was gone, replaced by a hollow, frightened look. "Hey," he said, his voice cracking. "Liam." I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked into my apartment, looking around at the high ceilings, the view of the city lights, the sleek furniture. He walked over to the window and just stared out. "Nice place," he whispered. "Way nicer than my condo." "Well, my old condo." "Old condo?" I asked, handing him a bottle of water. "What happened?" Liam laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. He sat down heavily on my sofa, burying his face in his hands. "Dad sold it," he mumbled through his fingers. "He sold the condo. He canceled the Porsche order the Monday after the party. He lost the deposit, but he didn't care. He said the firm is restructuring. That's code for bleeding money." I sat in the armchair opposite him. I felt a twinge of sadness, but not for my father. For Liam, he was just a kid, really. A spoiled kid, yes, but he had been used as a prop in Dad's theater just as much as I had. "He cut me off, Connor." Liam looked up, his eyes red. "He said since I'm not going to Harvard anymore, I don't deserve the support." "Wait." I leaned forward. "You're not going to Harvard? You got in." Liam shook his head. He looked down at his hands, hands that had never done a day of hard labor in their life. "I didn't get in, Connor." The silence stretched between us. "What do you mean?" I asked slowly. "I was waitlisted." Liam confessed, the words rushing out now. Dad told everyone I got in. He said he could pull strings. He said he knew the dean. He donated $50,000 to the alumni fund to grease the wheels. But after the party, after Mr. Harris left and the rumors started spreading about Dad's ethics, the dean returned the check. They rescinded the consideration. "I'm not going to law school." He started to cry, not the fake, attention-seeking cry of a child, but the deep, heaving sobs of someone whose entire identity had just evaporated. "I hate it anyway," he choked out. "I hate the law. I hate the reading. I hate the people. I just wanted him to be proud of me. I just wanted to be the favorite so he wouldn't look at me the way he looked at you." That hit me hard. We were both victims of Richard Torres. I was the scapegoat and Liam was the trophy, both dehumanizing in different ways. I was ignored, but Liam was suffocated. He was forced into a mold that didn't fit him, terrified that if he cracked, he'd be discarded. And now he had cracked. I got up and sat next to him. I put a hand on his shoulder. He flinched at first, expecting a lecture, but then he leaned into it. "I don't know what to do," Liam whispered. "I have no money. I have no degree. I have no car. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," I said firmly. "You're Liam. Just Liam. And honestly, that's better than being Richard Torres's son." "I have nowhere to go," he admitted. "Mom is a wreck. She just cries in her room all day and drinks wine. Dad is screaming at everyone. I can't stay there." I looked at my apartment. It was big. I had a guest room I wasn't using. "You can crash here," I said. Liam looked up, shocked. "What? After everything? I made fun of you. I took the car. I let him treat you like garbage." "Yeah, you did," I said. "I wasn't going to lie to him. You were a jerk. But you were also 22 and scared of a bully. I'm not doing this for Dad. I'm doing it because you're my brother. And because Grandma would kill me if I left you on the street." A weak smile appeared on his face. "But there are rules." I stood up. "Rule number 1. You get a job. I don't care if it's flipping burgers or parking cars. You learn what money actually feels like when you earn it. Okay, he nodded. I can do that. Rule number 2. You figure out what you want, not what Dad wants. What do you actually like doing? Liam hesitated. I like graphic design. I used to make all the posters for the frat parties. I was actually good at it. Then do that, I said. Build a portfolio. Be a graphic designer. But do it yourself. And rule number 3? Don't touch my Audi. I grinned. Liam actually laughed. It was the first real, genuine laugh I'd heard from him in years. Over the next few months, I watched my brother transform. It wasn't easy. He got a job as a barista at a coffee shop down the street. The first week, he came home with burns on his hands and feet that ached. "This is hell," he groaned, collapsing on the floor. "Welcome to the real world," I said, stepping over him to get a beer. "Rent is due on the 1st. But he stuck with it. He stopped wearing suits. He started wearing jeans and t-shirts. He looked younger, lighter. He started taking online courses for design. He showed me his sketches. They were good. Really good. Meanwhile, the news about our parents kept trickling in. I heard from Grandma that Dad had to sell the Rolls-Royce. He was driving a leased sedan now. The firm had downsized. They moved from the top 3 floors of the skyscraper to a smaller office in a business park near the airport. Mom texted me occasionally. "Connor, your father is very stressed. It would be nice if you reached out. Maybe alone? Just until the market turns." I didn't reply. I had established a boundary of steel. I wasn't their bank, and I wasn't their emotional crutch. I had forgiven Liam because he showed remorse and a willingness to change. My parents only showed regret that they got caught. One evening, about 4 months after Liam moved in, I came home to find him sitting at the kitchen island with a letter in his hand. "What's that?" I asked, putting down my gym bag. "It's from Dad," Liam said. "He sent it to the coffee shop. He must have followed me." "What does it say?" Liam slid it across the counter. "Liam, come home. We can fix this. I've spoken to a friend at a Tier 2 law school. We can get you in. Stop this nonsense with the coffee and the computer art. You are a Torres. Come back and take your place." I watched Liam carefully. "What are you going to do?" Liam picked up the letter. He crumpled it into a ball. He stood up, walked to the trash can, and dropped it in. "I have a shift at 6 a.m., he said. "And I have a freelance logo design due tomorrow for a bakery. I don't have time for his fantasy life." I smiled. "Proud of you, kid." "Don't call me kid," he retorted, grabbing an apple. "I make the best macchiato in the city. Put some respect on my name." It was a small moment, but it felt like a massive victory. The cycle of abuse, the generational curse of the Torres family, the need for validation through status, had stopped with us. It was a Sunday afternoon, almost a year to the day since the party at the Sterling. The air was crisp, signaling the start of autumn. I drove the Audi out to Grandma Eleanor's house. She was sitting on her porch, wrapped in a knitted shawl, watching the leaves fall. She looked friendlier than before, but her eyes were still sharp, like polished flint. "You're late," she said as I walked up the steps. "I stopped to get the good pastries," I said, holding up a white box. "And I brought Liam." Liam walked up behind me, carrying a portfolio case. He kissed Grandma on the cheek. "How's the artist?" she asked, patting his hand. "Starving," Liam joked, "but happy. I just landed a contract to redesign the menu for a chain of restaurants. It pays actual money." "Good," she nodded. "Better to starve on your own terms than feast on someone else's lies." We sat there for a while, drinking tea and eating almond croissants. It was peaceful. There was no posturing. No talk of mergers or acquisitions or country club memberships. Just 3 people enjoying the silence. "Have you heard from him?" Grandma asked me quietly, knowing exactly who she meant. "I saw him," I admitted. It was true. 2 days ago, I had been at a red light near the courthouse. Car pulled up next to me. A gray sedan, mid-range, nothing special. I looked over. It was Richard Torres. He looked older. His hair was thinner, and he wasn't wearing his usual Italian tie. He looked tired. He was staring straight ahead, gripping the steering wheel like he was hanging onto a cliff edge. He turned his head and saw me. He saw the Audi RS7. He saw me in my scrubs. I was coming off a shift. He saw the badge around my neck that read Trauma Team Lead. For a second, our eyes locked. I expected anger. I expected him to yell. But there was nothing. Just a hollow, sad resignation. He looked at me like I was a stranger he used to know. Then the light turned green, and he drove away. He drove slowly. I didn't wave, I told Grandma. I just watched him go. He made his bed, Grandma said, brushing crumbs off her lap. He spent his whole life building a monument to himself, forgetting that monuments are cold and empty. You boys, you built a home. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was paper-thin, warm and dry. Connor, she said, do you remember what I told you when you started nursing school? When everyone else was laughing. You told me that Grandpa drove an ambulance. I did, she smiled. But I didn't tell you the rest. Your grandfather was a simple man. He never made more than a living wage. But when he died, Connor, the church couldn't hold all the people. There were people standing in the parking lot. People whose hands he had held. People he had joked with on the way to the hospital. People he had saved. She squeezed my hand. Your father measures his life by the height of his building. Your grandfather measured his by the depth of his impact. That is the only inheritance that matters. And you, my dear, you are the richest man I know. I felt a lump in my throat. I looked at Liam, who was sketching Grandma in his notebook, capturing the lines of wisdom on her face. I looked at the trees. I looked at my hands, the hands that my father had mocked, the hands that had placed IVs, intubated airways, and held the hands of dying strangers. I realized then that the anger was gone. The burning need for revenge that had driven me to invite Dr. Webb to that party. It had faded. What was left was clarity. I wasn't a servant in the way my father meant it, as an insult. I was a servant in the truest, most noble sense of the word. I served life. I served humanity. And in return, I had found a strength that no amount of money could buy. My phone buzzed. It was a page from the hospital. Multi-car pileup on I-95. Mass casualty event. All anesthesia staff report. I stood up immediately. The instinct kicked in. The calm focus. I have to go, I said. Go, Grandma said, waving her cane. Go do God's work. I'll drive you back later, Grandma, Liam said, closing his book. Go get Connor. I ran to my car. I fired up the engine. As I sped toward the highway, toward the chaos and the blood and the fear, I didn't feel burdened. I felt privileged. I was Connor Torres. I was a nurse. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it is this: your self-worth is not a negotiation, and it certainly isn't an inheritance. We live in a world that loves to put price tags on people. We judge by job titles, by the car in the driveway, by the letters after a name. My father thought that being a lawyer made him a king, and that my choice to serve others made me a peasant. He was wrong. Not because I ended up making money, that was just the icing on the cake, but because he didn't understand that character is the only currency that doesn't devalue when the market crashes. Parents, please hear me. Do not live your failed dreams through your children. Do not treat your kids like trophies to be polished or investments to yield a return. Love them for who they are, not what they can do for your ego. And to anyone out there feeling like the black sheep or the disappointment, because you chose a path that makes you happy instead of one that makes you rich, keep walking. The view from the path of integrity is worth more than any penthouse. I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have you ever had to choose between approval and your own happiness? Let's remind each other that we are not alone. Thank you for listening.